higher education is the home of meritocracy, if you believe that higher education is the place where the best learning takes place, and if you believe that higher education is the place of innovation where we have the best people advancing knowledge to improve the endeavours of humankind, then does it not make you question why there are so few women at the top? I want to talk to you today and give you some insights into the Athena Project and give you ideas about how working to improve the environment in higher education can help to address the underrepresentation of women at all levels within the higher education environment. The Athena Project was set up in 1999, and it was the first project that I gave birth to when I was working at the Department for Trade and Industry, leading the Women in Science unit. It was the first project that I wrote a speech for the Minister, and it was the first time I came across a group of inspirational women from the academic environment who were really determined that they were going to make a change. And those women in particular that come to note were Julia Higgins, who was a fellow at the Royal Academy, Nancy Lane, who was involved from Cambridge, who was very active in the policy environment, was involved in the 1995 white paper and was instrumental in the Rising Tide report being commissioned by the chief scientist. But also Caroline Fox, who was an absolute stalwart of the Athena Project and still is to this day, and a huge champion for equality in higher education. The Athena Project set out very specifically to advance and promote women in science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine. It was named Athena for a specific reason. Athena was the goddess, arguably, of subversive warfare, and all of the things that are listed there: wisdom, courage, inspiration, law and justice, mathematics, strength and strategy. And those were the values that were embodied within the Athena Project. But what was really, really different about the Athena Project was that it was developed by scientists, it was developed for scientists, and it was developed to benefit science. For where is science that aims to be about excellence, about meritocracy, when we're losing so much talent along the way? And when I talk about science here, I'm talking about the inclusive kind of science. Don't you love it when you use a word that just encompasses everything? But actually it's a bit of a mouthful. It's the inclusive kind of science that includes technology, computer science, medicine, maths and psychology. The Athena Project, when people sign up to join the journey and go become a Star Gold member, you can't just be aiming to get a bronze and think that you've achieved it. It is very much a journey, and you have to go round the loop a number of different times. You have to aim for the stars, you have to go for the top. And what we're looking for when we look for a really good Athena university and really strong department is a department that's got a really inclusive, supportive culture, one that shows that it's continually working towards equality. And even when you think you've got there with gold, there's still things that you can do. It's about making sure that career progression is something that is available to everybody within the department. But as well as getting there and ticking all those boxes along the way, it's ultimately about being a beacon, about innovating. And Bournemouth University has got a reputation for innovating in developing and identifying niches in which it can operate. And it needs to then start thinking about how it can bring that creativity and innovation and bring it to make it the most amazing place for women in science, technology, engineering and maths to work. Back in the 1990s, women's academic careers were slightly different, and that's where I was doing research at the time. And there was a book written by, published in 2000 by Henry Excovitz called Athena Unbound. Perhaps the name choice was not just by chance. And he talks about how the women in science agenda was being addressed in the 90s. And it was typically a group of women being active, meeting, squeezing in time at lunchtimes and after work. And he typifies these as brown paper bag lunches. But they tended to be outside of the power, outside the decision making, and not really involved, and were just seen as a group of women getting together, and often derided. The science laboratory environment in the 1990s, perhaps that photograph's from a little bit before that. Women in science, though, were personified as the ice maiden or the dragon. The ice maiden would get on and work and focus on her career, publishing papers and establishing an impeccable academic record. She has risen to the top. The other individuals who challenged the system, challenged the people who called the women in the office the girls, challenged the behaviours and the opportunities that were taken away from them. They were referred to as dragons. And I saw that firsthand in the lab that I was working in. We shared an engineering materials and a mechanical engineering building. We had a workshop. We had a mix of staff. We actually had 3 women and 3 guys in the building. It was a very small building. My colleague was very passionate about gender-inclusive language, and she would challenge people. But when she challenged people, they referred to her behind closed doors as the dragon. And the phrase in the morning was, "Is she making toast?" Ask yourselves, is that the kind of comments that you would hear in the corridors of your university? That's 25 years ago. When I was a postgrad student and I was walking across the courtyard with the head technician to go and look at the rig that he was building for me, and he just said to me, "I don't know why they let you girls do PhDs. You're only going to go off and have babies." Would that be something you'd still hear today? I railed against that at the time. I bristled and I determined, no, I wouldn't. But nature took a different course. So things have changed, but how much have they changed? One of the fundamental problems back in the 90s, pre-Athena SWAN, is that there was little data. People could see there weren't very many women, but there was no generic picture that was available statistically that showed the graph. And of course, scientists and engineers understand what the graph tells them. There was no data, no, there was no problem. Nobody could prove it. The women sitting around having their brown paper bag lunches couldn't gather the evidence together to put a really hard case together. And so it was only when data started to be more structurally organised and collected that people could start making a clear case. But even when data was available that looked at people, women in the professoriate, it looked at women on committees, it either wasn't shared, it wasn't verified, it was derided, it was inaccurate. Opinion surveys never, very rarely even, were looked at and disaggregated by gender. So it was just no data, no problem. So the Athena group came together, and a few champions for change that are worth mentioning here. 1997, Wennerus and Wold from the Netherlands, looked at the Swedish Medical Research Council because they weren't getting grant applications at the same rate as their male colleagues. And they sat down late into the night for many, many weeks and gathered the data on publication rates of all the people who were applying for grants at the same time as them. And they discovered that women had to publish 2.7 times more than the men to get the same Research Council funding. Fundamentally, that wasn't right. And why was that happening? That made the research funding world sit up quite sharply. The other piece of interesting work was done at MIT and was led by Nancy Hopkins. And with the blessing of the provost, she set a committee up and set about taking a very thorough scientific method way of analysing the data surrounding the pay and the performance and the space and the laboratories at MIT. And she found there was a pay gap. And most startlingly of all, she knew it was true, but she never had the evidence that the men had much more laboratory space than she did, or any of her female colleagues. Again, that made the establishment sit up. I mentioned Julia Higgins and Nancy Lane as champions for change and coming together and putting women in science on the landscape in the UK, but importantly in setting up the Athena Project and getting the Higher Education Funding Council on board. Good practice was in place at the York Chemistry Department in the shape of Perrott, and the baton was picked up by Paul Walton, who's a huge champion for the Athena SWAN Charter, and the York Chemistry Department was the first to get Athena Gold. But in reality, York had been doing a huge amount of work for a number of years beforehand, building a really inclusive working environment. So what is it that's important about the Champions for Change? And something that has changed significantly is that those asking for change aren't just the women. Men have come on board too, and that is fundamental. We've seen Max and Paul, but actually we're seeing a lot more men realising the importance of making sure that women have equality of opportunity at work. People whose daughters are now moving into academia. People who have relocated their families and taken them away from their family support networks. They have a greater need for flexibility so they can share the childcare. If you're in a dual career partnership, if you're a woman scientist, the chances are you're married to another scientist or engineer or technical person, whether in academia or in industry. Men tend to choose a partner from any broad sphere of work. And when you're both working in a technical career, you might be limited by the employers available. But equally, those men are beginning to see what's happening to their female partners. There's also a greater role that dads are taking in the bringing up of their children, sharing of the parenting, the drop-off and the collection from school. But also, champions might have children who've got special needs or health issues within the family or caring responsibilities. Those are raising the awareness of a wider range of people than ever before about the need for changing the working environment and how we're dealing with it. So the Athena Project and the Athena SWAN Charter, the Athena SWAN Project was set up in '99, and let's perhaps look at it a bit like a relay race. So the first leg was about pilot projects. Small amounts of money were offered to universities to try things, to explore things, to gather some data, to set up a mentoring programme, to run activities that helped women write more grant applications, perhaps giving people interview practice, a wide range of different activities, and asking for innovations and creativity in the way that things were tried. After a couple of years of projects, the second leg of the relay established some regional networks which came out of the pilot projects. Another projects that looked at the culture within the university departments. And then out of all that knowledge that was being gathered, good practice papers were produced which really improved the evidence base, and there was a very strong focus on looking at impact of specific projects. The baton was then passed to looking at excellence, but also looking at what it was like and asking men and women about how things were changing, and the asset survey was born. That's now run twice, and I believe is about to be run again. And the asset survey asked about career progression and development, and gave some really great insights across the whole country into how careers are changing. And of course the awards programme, which you know about. So how have those changes led to differences in academic careers? And so what we now have is this much stronger database and access to the HESA data disaggregated by gender available, and we're all very familiar now with these scissor plots that emerged from the European Commission Women in Science Unit in the early 90s, which showed the loss quite starkly of women as you go up the academic ladder, starting at the degree level and moving up to professorial level. I think that one's in maths, and it's 4.5% women at the professor level. And so what we have in 2014 is a very different climate where we've got lots of data available. We've got universities who've achieved gold, and we know what good practice is beginning to look like. But importantly, we also know that good practice is being shown to have an impact in departments. So what have we learned from the 15 years of Athena? We know that women experience a cumulative disadvantage. It's very easy to do the maths. If people start on a slightly different pay level, maybe only 1%, when you come to the second year and they're paid 10% pay rise, and we can all dream that the men are going to be paid 10% of 1% more than the women, and then year on year we're going to see that gap widen. But equally, if we give the man a promotion perhaps a little bit before he's ready for it and the woman doesn't get it, his career is starting to diverge from the career path of the women. So what we're seeing is that bad practice in departments has a negative effect on women's careers compared to men's careers. And then what we've also been seeing through all the different work that's been done through Athena is that good practice benefits women more than men. And there are a number of good practice guides that are available online on the Athena Forum website. So, good practice, what is it about? It's about practice. It's like sport. You need to get fit for what you're about to do. It's a bit like shooting baskets into the basketball. Once you find the sweet spot, muscle memory clicks in, and you start just doing things automatically. You know where to put it. And really that's what we're about in terms of trying to go for gold. It's about making things become habit and evolving the culture as we go forward. One of the things that we have learnt, and Paul Walton talks very eloquently about this, is the diversity loop of learning. And if you want to take, as an example, core hours, you might have meetings that take place from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. If you want to limit to core hours to make it better accessible for people who need to be away to do childcare or cook tea for somebody, and bring those core hours into a sort of 9 till 5 framework, if you go straight to 10 till 3, you'll have huge division. People will rail against it, and it will be something that will push you back rather than advancing the cause. So things need to be moved forward incrementally, hence going through the bronze, silver, gold milestones. And so the diversity loop of learning means you really have to keep on going round. And at York, when they first created core hours, and they went 9 to 5, and that happened, but the impact was very marginal, and they eventually got down to 10:30 to 3, and people were comfortable by the time they got there, but it isn't something that they achieved in one year. It was something they had to try and adjust, and people had to adjust their behaviours and expectations and their planning in order to meet with that. We know that it's absolutely imperative that if you're going to move forward and evolve to become a really strong department that's inclusive, that helps women's careers advance at the same rate as men's, that it needs to be an integral part of the departmental academic plan. Let's take the core hours as an example again. If you don't make sure that the core hours part is integral to the department plan, and the people who are involved in planning, whether it's planning lectures, whether it's doing it's looking at assessments or appraisal markings, you will find that people will be operating out of tune with each other. So it's about edging things forward in an orchestrated way. Evidence, well, that's the bane of everybody working in the equality and diversity arena's life. Collecting evidence, collecting data is really quite difficult and time consuming, and especially when you've just gone through your bronze award, it seems terribly dull and tedious. But then by bringing in the people from the different departments who've got more of a science and engineering bent on things, they can understand what the issues really are. And actually that is what becomes the cornerstone of your progress, because it enables you to benchmark where you're going. So the good practice departments, they really have shown that they are able to attract and retain women better. And the departments that do have moved forward significantly along the Athena journey have shown that they've created a department and a culture that benefits all of their academic, technical and administrative staff, and creates this environment that's positive and welcoming and inclusive. So I mentioned again, I think it is really important. Progress is driven by data, because that's evidencing what we're actually achieving. So dull as it might be, it's where we've got to go. What kind of data have you been collecting? You've probably been looking at the HESA data and looking at your own internal HR statistics about the different levels that people are at. You might have collected data on the pay gap. Other ways of collecting data are doing staff surveys, breaking them down by gender, other different protected characteristics, but also making sure that postgraduates are also involved within that process. But also, if you've got teaching fellows here, they're an integral part of the community, and they need to also be reflected and included in the career development programme that you've got in the organisation. So survey data is something that can help you to get a benchmark. It can give you anonymous data, but also focus groups play a really important part in allowing minority groups to come together and have a safe forum, if you like, to have a conversation about what things are really like, but also to be creative and innovative and make suggestions and shape the departmental plan about what it is that you're going to do. So you've submitted your bronze application, and it's perhaps tempting to sit back and just wait for the letter or the phone call to come from the Athena unit at the Equality Challenge unit. But the reality is that you don't need to just sit back. It's not a license to do something. It's not a license to go forward with your action plan. Pick your action plan up as it is and start doing it. because you're only going to have to then work towards getting another submission, and if you're going for Research Council funding, just know that you have to demonstrate that you are making progress on equality and diversity. So post-submission, don't sit back, just get on and start working on that action plan. And the first thing maybe you want to do is give those minority groups a voice. Create that opportunity for them to have that chat. Maybe it's a lunch, maybe it's an afternoon workshop around a theme, but then within one you're giving them something, then give them the opportunity as well at the end of the workshop to contribute into looking at how things could be better. And these sort of workshops are really important in looking for examples that things perhaps aren't what they seem on the surface, that things aren't all rosy, that there may be cases of indirect and subconscious discrimination. There may be somebody shouting, "Has she made toast this morning?" Not referring to what she's had for breakfast. It's about raising awareness of what the Athena SWAN Charter is about and what the intentions of the university as a whole are. And it's about understanding what the issues within the university in all the corners of the departments are like. And it's about finding out what are the real issues, because every university's department is different. You can't pick up another department's plan and just think, we'll just use that, because you've got different people in your environment and it's a very different environment. So it's about tuning something to how you are and what you want to achieve. But ultimately, it helps give you another baseline for measuring change and finding out how things really are going. So I want to now just look a little bit more about the specific things that you can do. So one of the important things in terms of advancing women's careers in academia is about levelling the appointment and promotion playing field. There's lots of anecdotes about the 80-20 rule, about how guys will apply for a job when they can do 20% of it, and women won't apply for it until they can do at least 80% of it. And actually, people should be applying for jobs to get the experience of going for an interview and being challenged with questions. And line managers and department heads have a role in encouraging people to apply, but also creating an environment where where women can get the experience and practice before going to interviews. I like this cartoon for two reasons, and I'll tell you in a moment. So the recruitment and promotion process is really important, and an interview typically forms an important part of that process everywhere. And Lord Brown in 2002 talked about homosocial reproduction and creating and recruiting people in our own image. And in the oil and gas industry, it was white and male and Anglo-Saxon. And on the image here, we've got an interview panel of 6 men with moustaches, all wearing suits and the same striped tie. And the quote says, and this is another really, really key point, I think. There's a lot of research now about interviews and unconscious bias. And it talks about the benefit of being the first or the last into the interview, that people have a memory effect for those. It talks about having checking on the order of the candidates. It talks about having the same questions for candidates. People do like to tailor the questions in interviews to the individual that they're interviewing. But is this the kind of fair question that is fair? And would you ask this question to a male candidate? Finally, Ms. Sullivan, your honest opinion of the current fad for so-called diversity in employment. So speaks the very undiverse panel. And capturing the importance of looking at the interview process is really very vital in ensuring that women can really progress through the ranks. Is your process open, transparent and fair? Has everybody that's on that panel been trained? And is the training up to date and modern? Does it reflect the research that's around about interview processes and the effects of unconscious bias on the interview process? The European Molecular Biology Association a few years ago did a piece of work over a number of years looking at all the interviews that took place within the organisation. That was run from the Women's Committee. And the head of the laboratory did agree to publish the results, from which they did. And they did a number of different double-blind tests with interviews, and they mixed and matched how they did it. But what they actually found to be really effective was simply to, before the interview started, to remind every member of the panel it was their responsibility to be fair to every single candidate. And that seemed to have a really straightforward positive effect on their results. So think about the interview order. Think about the language that's being used to the candidates, and also think about the language that's coming back to you as an interviewer from references. Think too about the language that men and women use to describe their own skills. It's a sad fact, as part of the unconscious bias literature, that both men and women will view and use stronger words to describe male characteristics than women's characteristics. And it's also about encouraging women to step forward and take the plunge and be bold to go for promotion. There are many, many things that can be done. But even aside from the promotion and interview process, what are you doing in terms of career development within the department? It's a self-fulfilling cycle. It should never stop. Does the department take career development seriously, or is it lip service? Are people embarrassed to ask for a review or an appraisal? Do early career researchers get active career development opportunities, whether it's skills development or exposure to committees, to finance and to planning that goes on in the higher education environment? If you do have career development programmes in place, are you looking at the quality of it? Are you looking at who's taking part in it? How is the staff appraisal system taken up? Is it mandatory for every person to have an appraisal? And does the appraisal process just finish with the how people have done and what they've done in the last year, and it then allows them to get a percentage mark on their performance pay? Or is the appraisal looking into the future and looking for opportunities that the person doing the appraisal can positively take forward to enable the person being appraised to actually go and gain some extra experience, so that the following year they've got an opportunity to go up and be put forward for promotion? Do line managers, do heads of departments, do other academics, when interacting with researchers, with teaching fellows or technicians, do they take the time to think about things that people might think about, or suggest they go to a particular conference or a committee meeting? So lots of things that can be done in terms of career development. And one of the challenges, though, of the interview process and career development and many of these other diversity initiatives can be seen as being the burden of being a female researcher, a female academic. And it's something I've heard over the years many times. I'm fed up of being the only woman on the interview panel. I can't be going to every single interview panel in every single department. Such is the burden of the lone female academic at a senior position. Do women academics get given more pastoral care? Do they get responsibility for the women students more than the men? Do they always have to turn up at the open days? It's really important to have women at the open days to show that women are an integral part of the department. Do they get expected to take up more mentoring roles? Are they the key role model that gets walked out at every opportunities? Do they not have much help and support at home? Do they not have that partner that's helping and not having that wife to do the wifely domestic stuff at home? It can be difficult, but equally it's really important that we have men involved in supporting women students, understanding some of the concerns about women students. And there's research around about career confidence in women and how women in engineering and technology seem to have lower career confidence. So a lot of it is about investing in people management. It's about learning from the private sector, where people are on a graduate development programme as soon as they join, where opportunities for skills, giving people the soft skills of working better with people, understanding how to manage conflict between other individuals and recognising when to step in. People management isn't just about looking after those who are the high academic flyers. It's about making sure that all the staff in the departments are valued. They all have access to the right kinds of development. And so, what kind of programme have you got in place? And does it fit the needs of everybody? And is it reviewed? What's in place in terms of the PIs and team leaders and heads of departments? What have you got in place in terms of skills development? A lot of universities, when I did a piece of work recently, looked at, used the Belbin model for team working and Myers-Briggs. Those are really quite old now. More positive ways to look at strengths-based tools, which start building a mutual respect for people's different way of approaching problems. Something that I'm using in a number of different organisations. How do things change? Who are the people that make change? We talked earlier about the women academics, their brown paper bag lunches, about the women that stuck their heads above the parapet and got called dragons, the women who've really pursued single-mindedly academic careers, risen to the top, but are now standing up, putting their heads above the parapet and actually influencing the very high echelons of academia. What can we do to make sure that the people who want to make a difference make a difference? If you've got networks in place for women academics, for different people we might have other affinity networks, looking for LGBT, looking at different ethnic minority groups, those groups need to be legitimised, they need to be supported, and they need to be seen to have an important voice and to be able to have access and dialogue with senior management. It's about encouraging career confidence as well, particularly we are talking really with Athena about women's careers. It's about making sure they believe that they can achieve. And sometimes it's just a small comment that can actually give them that seed of self-belief, but it does need planting. Departments, people in the senior positions need to foster expectations that women will achieve. Don't presume that they've got a family and they don't want to travel overseas. Don't presume that they're not able to go to a conference because of family commitments. Don't presume that somebody doesn't want to go and do field work on a ship for 3 months because they've got a young family. They might love going to sea and being away from their family for a little while, and there's nothing better than having been away and going back home and seeing the little places. People have different priorities and different aspirations for their lives, and the different things that really make their hearts sing. And so it's not for people in senior management positions and department heads to just make an assumption that just because you're a woman, you want to do X, Y, or Z. A lot of this really hinges around the workplace culture, the way we do things around here. And changing the way we do things around here is really hard because it's a bit of a shift. It's about changing the culture, is recognising and valuing the contributions of all the different individuals that are in the department, and valuing people and not undermining the value of someone's contribution because they're a part-time worker. Creating a feeling of respect between individuals. Part-time working, making it available, flexible working, I'm going to come on to that in a minute. But also it's about having the right kind of languages and behaviours, and if it's inappropriate, it's challenging it. Not so much about whistleblowing as about making sure that people feel comfortable saying that's not right, or taking someone aside after someone's made an inappropriate comment in a meeting or has ignored the contribution from someone in a meeting and actually said, do you know that Professor Y said that before Professor X, where Professor Y is the female. We all have unconscious biases and we need to acknowledge them. We have those because of our learning experiences. So those of us that grew up in the 60s and 70s will have grown up perhaps with the sitcom Till Death Us Do Part with Warren, which was terribly racist and absolutely shocking programme to even hear the jokes from it today. But a lot of people in Britain grew up with that as part of the community in which they grew up. And we can't not have biases associated with certain words and people. Being able to acknowledge that you have a bias is really important. Once you've acknowledged that you've got a bias, it's something that you can start working with and pause before you answer and really check that you are being fair to all the people that you're talking to. So the cartoon, I don't know if you can read it. I'm looking for ideas on how we can improve our corporate culture. You could start by being less of a micromanaging D-bag who hides like a Higgs boson whenever we need a decision. That didn't help. Will honesty still be taboo in the new culture? Honesty is a really important part, and that's where the focus groups come in, allowing people to be honest in an unthreatening way. I said before you've gone for bronze, but actually writing it into a document is not just the only way forward. It's actually walking the talk, and it's your behaviour. It's the behaviour of you, it's the behaviour of your colleagues that makes the difference to the culture in the department. I mentioned before about the burden for women academics. So some universities have got workload software that helps to balance the time they're spending on different responsibilities. So sharing responsibilities for work is one thing, but actually the really important thing in advancing careers is about sharing the opportunities and the experiences. And it's important going for senior positions to have finance experience. So how many women are being given access to sitting on the finance committee for a period of time and gaining that really important vocabulary and appreciation of the money behind the operation of the university. It's important to make sure that women as well as men are given the opportunities for profile committee positions that can help them build their careers and give them exposure as well to the senior leadership in the organisation. So the way that that's done in many places, it's rotating the committee appointments. But rotating the committee appointments shouldn't be something that is just done by giving the nod to a friend or someone who's asked. It's about making sure that it's rotated in a fair and equitable way. And maybe one way to do that is to create some observer roles and provide the opportunity, maybe even for postgrads or very early career researchers, to go on a committee and spend a little bit of time, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, taking part in that committee and just observing the language and behaviours that are taking place. Advancing women's careers, it's without doubt women tend to have maternity leave and career breaks, but there's also adoption leave and broader parental leave. So flexibility and balance, though, in managing work and enabling people to stay attached to the workforce for longer isn't something that's just limited to children. Sometimes people need flexibility for other reasons. When I was 25 and working in industry, I was working 100 miles from Bournemouth, and I wanted to go windsurfing Saturday, Sunday, and if I could possibly Friday night. That meant that I had to drive 100 miles back home, and if you can believe it, the M3 motorway finished at Winchester, and there was a set of traffic lights. So the journey on a Friday night would take 100 miles would take me nearly 4 hours, and the journey on a Monday morning to get back to work would take me 3.5 hours. So it was a really difficult time, and it took me a long time before I managed to encourage the organisation to set up flexible working in a way that just allowed me to leave early on a Friday and come in a tad later on a Monday. So flexibility isn't just for family reasons, it's not just for caring reasons. It might be that somebody wants to follow the England cricket team and take a period of time off to go to Australia. So flexibility, it's got to be more than a policy. Practice, walking the talk, is what really makes the difference. And leaving the responsibility down to the line manager, just having the right to ask, doesn't mean it's actually going to be implemented. You may have a culture of presenteeism, where it's actually bold to be the last one to turn the lights off, and that might be at 9 o'clock at night. That people see that you're there early, you're leaving late. But what is the effectiveness of the work that you're doing? When we're really, really busy, we tend to want to go somewhere that's a bit quiet, where we can turn the email off and the phone doesn't ring. We go home to work. People know we're going home to work, and it tends to be respected. But if it's something that people need to do regularly, there are lots of different practices in terms of flexibility. But maybe people should be being encouraged to leave by 6 o'clock so that they can save the electricity and turn the lights off 3 hours earlier. One of the challenges, though, of introducing flexibility into the academic environment is that there tends to be prestige and inaugural lectures going on. There might be overseas visitors that need to be entertained, and there might even be meetings going on. So if you're working flexibly and you've got some core hours over certain days, you might miss out on key meetings in the department that are always on the same day of the week, or you might miss out on getting introduced to a really important profile visitor. And this then moves on into career breaks and the challenge of career breaks. It still tends to be women that go for career breaks. How can you make sure that those people on career breaks have a great career break, but also are able to come back? It's not rocket science, and it has been done. People have come back from 10-year career breaks in science and, with a lot of hard work, managed to get back onto the career ladder. What can you do? It's support the career breakers. Make sure there's a really good planning process in place. Make sure that you know, as a university, who's taken a career break before and who's managed to come back, so that they can connect. Create a buddy network, particularly though for when people are coming back from a period of illness or a period of maybe looking after children or an elderly relative. Give them a buddy to go and have a chat with, because when you've been out of the workplace, you perhaps have been doing lots of different tasks and got out of the habit of finishing things off. And that seems frustrating when you first come back from a career break. And so having somebody to bounce that off can help to just appreciate that it's not just you that's going crazy. If you are running a series of lectures or seminars, make sure that the colleagues on career breaks are able to come into those and stay on the invitation list. They may not want to come, they may not be able to come, but one time they may be able to come. And it's important for them in keeping their knowledge up to date, but also keeping their face known so they recognise changes and new people in the department. It may be that people on career breaks want to keep their technical skills up to speed. Have you got a system in place that allows them to pop in to sit at the back of an undergraduate lecture? It can help them to see how lecturing practices and technology is changing, and it could also help them to just keep their technology skills up to date and brushed up. And maybe they could be there as an informal mentor for students. Make sure that there's lots of information around and people know where to go and get it. But also there are a number of different schemes around. The Daphne Jackson scheme is a scheme to help people who've got a PhD to get back into a research career. So what do you see in good practice departments? So what have those departments found? They found that they're not only attracting women, they're getting more applications, but they're also retaining them and seeing them advancing up the academic ladder. But they're also seeing that the improved working conditions in their departments are actually benefiting everybody within that department. And it's a bit of a time-worn slogan, but it's better for women, better for men. But ultimately, as I started out saying, it's better for science because you've got more talent. When I was working on the Greenfield report for women in science some 10 years ago, I was sitting next to Bob Mayer to talk. He was the president of the Royal Society. And somebody was arguing that it wasn't possible to work part-time and maintain an academic career. And he said that was a load of balderdash, but he didn't use that word. He said very few scientific publications are single-authored. People work in teams in academia. And at an interview that I was doing for the same report with the director of the Hadley Centre for Climate Change, I was gleefully told of one job share position where there were 3 women who were working flexibly, who just had young children, who were working on one role, although the role was paid for 6 days a week. And he was thrilled. He had 3 brains, 3 very good brains, working on one academic problem. And when the 2 of them weren't working, he often heard that they'd been out in the park, and while the kids were playing, they were discussing the problem at hand. So he had a really effective way of tackling his problem and getting value out of women working flexibly. Those are really the key messages that I wanted to give to you today. It's about flexibility, it's about being inclusive, and it's about making sure that you walk the talk. That's my contact details. If you want to get in touch, please do. And those are a few links with some great references that you should make sure you go and visit.